Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first of Fibromyalgia Association Canada's Awareness Week presentations. I am Trudy Flint, Chair of the Board of Directors of Fibromyalgia Association Canada, or FAC as we like to call it. So thank you for joining us. Although we come together from many different places, I would like to acknowledge that the land I live on is Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik people first signed with the British Crown in 1726. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. In Nova Scotia, we are all treaty people. Before we get started, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. If you have any technical problems, please email webmaster@fibrocanada.ca. If you have any questions for David, please put them in the chat. We are pleased to provide captioning to accommodate the diverse needs of our audience. This presentation is being recorded for those who could not attend this live presentation, and for our YouTube channel. We will be muting all participants to reduce the noise feedback. Although fibromyalgia is such a debilitating and disabling condition and affects over 2 million people in Canada, it still is not always easy to receive disability benefits. Here today is David Brannen from Resolute Legal Disability Lawyers to talk us through how to make this process easier. David Brannen is a lawyer and the founder of Resolute Legal Disability Lawyers. He is a former occupational therapist and is the author of several consumer books on winning disability claims in Canada. His firm focuses exclusively on representing people in disability claims, including long-term disability, CPP disability, workers' compensation, disability tax credit, and the disability-related employment wrongful termination. David represents clients across many provinces in Canada. Thank you, David, for agreeing to do this presentation. I will turn it over to you.
Well, that's a great introduction. I really appreciate that. I will say one other thing I think it's relevant for this group is when I was in law school, I was doing summer work at a law firm, and one of the lawyers there said, "When you go back to law school, would you mind? You can do one of your courses as a self-directed study." He wanted me to do a study on fibromyalgia and within the litigation system in Canada. That would have been back in 2023, I think. So he and we reviewed every court case in Canada that had covered fibromyalgia up to that time. And it was a very important study that firm had used as part of their advocacy and litigation. And it was one of the first times it really opened my eyes to how fibromyalgia and other similar conditions are treated within the court system and how things evolve over time. And I'll talk a bit about that as we go through the presentation. Now, let me share this. And I'm coming to you, I know we're coming from all over the country here. I'm coming to you from New Brunswick, where I live. But strangely, most of my work is actually in Ontario, even though I live in New Brunswick. So let's take a look at this, fibromyalgia and disability benefits. I'm going to cover three areas. I'd like to take you through the types of benefits that would be available to someone in Canada with fibromyalgia who would have a disability. We'll cover very briefly how to apply. And I'm going to go over some tips for success that are specific if you're dealing with a disability claim for fibromyalgia. And I would encourage people to put your questions in the chat and we can go through all of them. It's probably easier to go through them at the end, I think, but just throw them in the chat and we can go through all of them. All right, so let's start by looking at the types. I got a typo already. The types of disability benefits and income support. The first one that often comes to mind is disability insurance benefits. These are available to people who have a job and have group benefits through their workplace or through a union or something like that. So there, when you have group benefits that have medical, dental, and all those things, often they will include short and long-term disability benefits. Some people aren't aware they have those. We get calls from people that weren't aware that they had long-term disability benefits through these group plans. So it's important, if you know someone or you have your own plan, to get them to check to make sure whether they may be covered for this type of benefit. Now, if you get approved under these group plans, you get a monthly payment, and the amount of the payment is usually going to be 60 to 80% of your pre-disability earnings. Just bear with me here. Here we go. Now, who can get these types of benefits? Again, you have to be enrolled in a plan, and that means you've got it through your work. You're paying the premiums, or your employer is paying the premiums to the insurance plan, and you're unable to do the substantial duties of your own occupation or any occupation. So it's like you have to be part of the plan, and then while a member of the plan and while working, you become unable to do the substantial duties of your own occupation or any other occupation can qualify you for those benefits. And quite often those benefits will go to age 65 from the date you qualify. Now, the next one that I'm sure a lot of you have heard about and are familiar with is CPP, Canada Pension Plan Disability Benefits. If we have any visitors from the US here today, those would be similar in the US to Social Security Disability Income. It's the same type of program. In fact, CPP disability was modeled after the Social Security Disability Income program in the US. Again, this, you can notice up top, I forgot to mention, this is work-related income support. So these are benefits available to people who have had a job and been in the workforce. CPP disability does require you to have been in the workforce and paid into the Canada Pension Plan. If you're in the workforce and you're an employee, it's one of your payroll deductions. You don't have any choice. It automatically gets taken off and paid into Canada Pension. You get a retirement pension out of that, but also it will make you eligible for a Canada Disability Pension if you meet their definition of disability before you turn 65. Now, the disability for Canada Pension Disability, to be eligible for that, you have to be unable to do what they call any substantially gainful occupation. And what that's been determined to be is that you're incapable of earning more than around $19,000 a year, 18, 19,000. The amount changes every year based on inflation, but that's kind of the threshold. So if you are incapable of earning that amount, then you become possible for you to be approved for CPP disability. The average payment that people get in 2023 is $1,133, with the maximum payment available is just over $1,500 a month. All right. Next will be workers' compensation. Now, this is an interesting one, but I have worked on workers' compensation fibromyalgia cases. Workers' compensation is unique in that it only pays you for work-related injuries or medical conditions. So if you have fibromyalgia and that is the primary source of your disability, to qualify for workers' compensation, you would need to show that something about the workplace was a cause of your condition. Doesn't have to mean that it's the only cause, because we all know fibromyalgia has many causes and many things contribute to it. But if you could show there was an injury at work, or you caught a virus at work, or there was something that kind of triggered the fibromyalgia, something from the workplace, an injury, the work conditions. We've had people with toxic exposures that have led to fibromyalgia. So if there's been some traumatic event at the workplace that has triggered the fibromyalgia, or in some cases made it worse, you could qualify for workers' compensation benefits. These are among the best benefits you can get if you can qualify for them. They pay a higher amount of your income in many cases, up to 85%. They will cover medical expenses and things like that. Workers' compensation, like CPP, like the disability insurance, they all go to age 65. So after 65, you would have to fall back on any kind of retirement pension or Canada Pension retirement, old age security, that kind of thing. Sorry, my voice is a little cracky here. I'm not sure why. All right. Now let's look at the ones where there are benefits in Canada for people who have maybe never worked or haven't worked recently, The first one would be provincial income support programs for people with disabilities. This is going to be ODSP in Ontario, AISH in Alberta, persons with disabilities in BC. These are just some of the names of the programs. Other provinces have, sometimes they're just called income support, but each province has its own system. Again, if you qualify for disability benefits under these programs, it makes a monthly payment. I know ODSP, I believe, is around $1,300 max a month for the income support component, but that's going to vary greatly from province to province. It's certainly not that high in Atlantic Canada, and I'm not 100% sure in other areas what the numbers would be there. For eligibility here, it's based on different factors. So it's not based on you making contributions to a pension plan or you being a worker in a work injury or anything like that. It's focused on where your province of residence is. It focuses on that you have a substantial restriction and you're basically an inability to work. It requires you to be in financial need. So if you are an independently wealthy, you wouldn't be able to apply for these benefits. So you have to show that you don't have an income coming in, basically that you can't meet your basic needs, and that you don't have assets available that you could liquidate to pay for your basic needs. This is one of the most frustrating programs. I'm sure people here could have stories about that. Very frustrating to deal with. And we're hopeful that there will be something else on the horizon that I'm going to talk about here as well. But this is one of the thing is that these programs are one of the ones that can fit almost anyone because it doesn't require you to have been a worker or work recently. But it also can be one of the most frustrating to get approved for and to keep the benefits. Okay. Disability tax credit. We get a lot of questions about this one. It's important to understand that this is not a monthly benefit. You don't get a payment every month unless there is some exceptions there for children. But for adults, it is not a monthly payment. You get an annual deduction from your taxes, but it only will be a benefit to you as if you actually have taxes owing. So if you don't have any income and you don't have any income tax being paid to Revenue Canada, the disability tax credit would not be benefit to you. Possibly in years before, if you had the disability years before and you did have income taxes then, they will apply retroactively. But if you live with someone who is a financial supporter within your household, that person can get your disability tax credit. So if you live in a household with someone who is an income earner and pays taxes to Revenue Canada, they can use your tax credit. When you get approved for the disability tax credit, they can use your tax credit on their taxes to get a rebate. Now, the disability tax credit does not, unlike the other programs which focus on disability from work, the disability tax credit just focuses on disability with ADLs, which are activities of daily living. And they have, I won't go through them all in detail, but they have a list of activities of daily living. They cover such things as walking, dressing yourself, feeding yourself, administering life-saving care, like diabetes medication or anything like that. It has a whole list of things. And if you have a market restriction in your ability to do any one of these activities of daily living, you can get approved. Now, the market restriction is quite a high level. It basically means that you're not independent, like you wouldn't be able to independently manage cooking in your household, right? If you lived alone, it would mean you had Meals on Wheels. You weren't able to independently manage cooking and those kind of things. Where someone with fibromyalgia would more likely get approved for the disability tax credit is there is a secondary way to get approved if you can show you have significant limitations in 2 or more areas. So you don't have a market restriction in one area, but you have a significant limitation in 2 or more areas. That's a more common way for someone with fibromyalgia to get approved for the disability tax credit. Okay, and there's one more that I want to talk about here, which is the exciting one, hopefully. Maybe some of you have heard of this, the Canada Disability Benefit. This is a new benefit. It has not come into effect yet, but it was passed by the federal legislature, both houses. So it has been passed. It just has not been brought into law yet because they are still working on putting the program together, building regulations to map out what it will look like. But at the highest level, we know some basic things about it. We know that, first of all, it's going to be not related to work. So it's going to be a benefit available to anyone, regardless of whether they've ever worked or not. We know that it will be available to what are described as working age people. I take that to mean 18 to 64. That's the area they're looking to fill the gap. It will require that you're unable to work. We know that amount. We know that much. We don't know the exact wording that it will take. That's being worked on right now. And we don't know. We know it'll be a monthly payment. However, we don't know the amount. The former minister, who's no longer, who's taken off this program, unfortunately, I hope that doesn't disrupt it, but there was a minister who was in charge. Her name escapes me at the minute, Carla Cultro. She had done a lot of descriptions of what this program would look like, and she described it as mirroring what the old age security program that's available to people at age 65. That program looks at your financial need and gives different monthly payment amounts based on your status, your family status, I guess would be one way to talk about it, whether you're single, whether you're in a household with other people. So they take these different factors into account. They look at your household income, and if you're below certain amounts of household income, you qualify for certain monthly payments. So that is what we expect this program to look like. But the detail is very short on details, unfortunately. The intention of this program is to lift people out of poverty who would otherwise have no access to some of those other benefits that I've talked here about. Like they don't qualify for CPP disability. They never were working and had group disability benefits. It wasn't a workers' compensation. This is meant to, in essence, top up the payments that you might qualify for under provincial benefits. The intent would be that this would top those up to bring your overall income from both programs to a level that would take people out of being in such financial distress. It remains to be seen how this is going to be implemented, and there's certainly a lot of work left to do. What we do know is that the government has to issue a report, I think by December. They have to give a status report by December, I believe. And then the program is supposed to be implemented probably by the end of next year or getting into the year after that. To be realistic is when I think we could see this program come in. But I'm happy to answer any questions people have about that. Okay, let's look at how to apply. So for any of these programs I've talked about, they follow the same basic system of how you apply. You have to, with each program has its own forms to fill out. Sometimes these are paper, sometimes they're more and more they're online. Whatever, but either option is usually open, that you can fill in paper forms and mail them in, or you can do an online kind of form right on the computer. All of them require a report from your doctor certifying that you have a disability. This can often be a barrier for people who either don't have a doctor or have a doctor that is less than supportive. So this is another thing we can talk about in the tips area, or people have questions on what to do if your doctor is not that supportive of your situation. Once you submit the forms and the doctor's report, it goes to the company or agency in charge of the disability program. They do something called adjudication. That simply means that they review the application and compare your application and how you're describing your disability with the requirements of the program to see if there's a match there from their point of view. If they think there's a match, that you meet the requirements, they will approve your claim and you will start getting the payments. If they, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, they will say that you don't meet the requirements, when in fact, in reality, you do, but they will say you don't. In those situations, people are left to do appeals. And that means you ask the agency to reconsider what their decision. You can sometimes submit more information to clarify things, different medical reports, ask them to reconsider their decision. And with all of these programs, if the agency or the company says, no, we've reviewed it and we don't think there's a problem here, we still don't think you qualify, all of these programs have an outside decision maker that you can go to for a final decision. With some situations, that's going to be the courts with judges who make a final decision, or sometimes even a jury, believe it or not. Others will go to tribunals like CPP disability, workers' compensation. They have their own kind of court set up just to deal with those cases. But each of those tribunals has a judge that will hear from you, and you get to tell your side of the story, and they will make the final decision. And then the agency or company has to go with whatever the tribunal or judge says. So if the judge or tribunal says that you get the benefit, the company has to pay you, or the agency, even if they don't agree. All right. Last section here is tips for success, and I'm happy to expand upon these in the questions as well. So one of the things I would encourage people not to do is focus too much on the diagnosis. Having a diagnosis of fibromyalgia is important, and it is helpful to get a disability case approved for fibromyalgia, but it is not necessary. So we've got many clients approved for disability benefits for fibromyalgia, even if the doctors are kind of in dispute or there's some questioning by different medical people. The focus is more courts are more focused on whether you can prove the symptoms and the limitations and the functional limitations. So how the fatigue affects you day to day, how the brain fog affects you with your ability to plan and organize and get through your day, how the pain affects you. They're more focused on like believing that you have those symptoms and those symptoms are real, even if there's not a medical consensus on a diagnosis of fibromyalgia. The second thing with fibromyalgia, because it is a condition where it does have symptoms that overlap with many other types of chronic conditions. There's a lot of overlap there. So it is quite important actually to remain open to testing for other conditions, even if you really know and believe that you have fibromyalgia. It can seem like, why am I doing this? This is ridiculous. Like, it's clear I have fibromyalgia. Why am I doing these, trying out the depression medications or these other things, testing for other metabolic conditions and all these different things? Why am I doing all those things if it's pretty clear that I have fibromyalgia? Well, I would agree. If you weren't dealing with a disability claim, then I would encourage you to just talk to your doctor about, well, like, is it really necessary? With disability claims, though, it is very important for you to demonstrate that you have ruled everything else out, because one of the easiest ways for these government agencies and insurance companies to deny your case is to show that you haven't done everything you could do, that you didn't try everything, that you didn't do this medical testing that was required. And maybe you don't even have fibromyalgia. And if you were to be tested, maybe you have this metabolic condition. And if they had figured that out, there's a medication. Like, that's the kind of games they will play. So it's very important to go through the hoops, even if it does seem kind of silly sometimes. Go through the hoops with your doctor to rule out all these other conditions. And many people are quite happy to do that, quite honestly. So this is not usually a big ask, but I want to point out how important it is, because with these disability claims, there is an obligation on you to show that you've done everything you can do. And you don't want to leave it open for the insurance company or government agency to try to show that you haven't, or make it seem like you haven't. The other one is cooperate with recommended treatment. This can be a problem, especially if you are not seeing eye to eye with your doctor. But it is important for these disability claims for you to show that you have the word the judges use, I don't really like the word, but complied with recommended treatment, that you have followed reasonable recommendations. And this is where you can run into problems where you may not agree with some of the recommendations, or your doctor is not really fibromyalgia literate. The treatment they're recommending is, that it's going to be not useful. This is where things can go off the rails sometimes. But as a lawyer, when I get these cases where people have been denied, my first goal is to make sure that my client has done all recommended treatment, or at least considered it. And sometimes we have to clean that up a little bit. We have to go back to the doctor and say, okay, yeah, we will try this thing, try it. It doesn't work. Then the insurance can show that you did try it, even though, and you did it in good faith, even though you believed it probably wouldn't work, you still tried it anyway. Those are the kind of things you often have to do to jump through these hoops. So the insurance companies and agencies can't say that, well, how do we know that you have a disability because you haven't tried all the recommended treatment of your doctors? Courts, when deciding these cases, either at the tribunal or in the courts themselves, they put a lot of emphasis on the doctors and what the doctor's recommendations are. And that can be frustrating, because sometimes you may have done more research and be better versed on the research than the doctors you're dealing with. Unfortunately, that they won't accept you as an expert, even though you have that expertise. So it's important to work with your doctors and try to foster a positive relationship and try to repair relationships if necessary to have the doctors come around and be on your side. Now, this next one here, evidence of attempts to remain in the workforce, is really important. Fibromyalgia, it has a spectrum of how it affects people. There are certainly many people can work with fibromyalgia and can work for a long period of time. Some people can work right to age 65 with fibromyalgia, but most unfortunately do not. So it is important. Insurance companies will, when they see someone with a condition that is chronic who was able to work for a number of years, their thing is, well, just keep working. You've been able to do this. It's important that you show that show that your symptoms have worsened over time and that you've taken steps to try to remain in the workforce. So things that we like to show that our clients have done is maybe they've tried to work part-time, they've talked to their boss or their employer to take away some of the duties or things that are more difficult in order to try to stay in their job. When necessary, that they have clients have left that job to go to an easier job that wouldn't be more suited, maybe not as mentally demanding or physically demanding, whatever the nature of the symptoms are, but to show that there's been efforts to try to stay in the workforce as long as possible. If we have a client that we can show that, the case is extremely winnable. Where cases are difficult is if someone worked their job and then just stops. The judge will often wonder, like, well, maybe you could have done more. Like, why is it that you just were able to do it and then you couldn't? The reality is many people weren't doing the job well, even though they were getting paid to work full time. I've had clients, I don't know if the one poor guy, he described himself as like the Walking Dead, that TV show. Like, he was showing up to work, he was there, he was lumbering around like a zombie, but he really wasn't functional and doing the work. But on paper, it showed he was working full time, he's being paid full time. So that can be a problem, unless you can have coworkers that will agree that you were definitely the Walking Dead. You weren't in there really doing any functional work. Better to go through your employer to try to get accommodations, maybe work part-time, this type of thing, and seek help if that's not going to be, it's not always easy depending on the employer. Some employers are not that open to that. Certainly his was not. He worked in a high pressure kind of sales environment. But that is something that when we're able to win a case, it's because we can show that our client made reasonable attempts to remain in the workforce for as long as they could. And finally, objective testing. Oh boy, you'll hear that a lot. Insurance companies especially like this word objective testing. That's compared to something called subjective testing. Subjective evidence is from you. So you just say it. You say, I have brain fog. This is how it feels. This is what it feels like near the end of the day when I can't function. I can't remember things. Here's what the pain level is. These are all things that can't be measured. They're invisible symptoms to the outsider. You really can know the level that these problems are. Now, sometimes it can be, you can look fatigued, but ultimately you're the only one that knows the severity of it. In theory, someone could fake it, right? Though in my experience, that is not a thing that really happens. Objective testing, on the other hand, is the best example I like to give is like an X-ray. It's taken, you can see it. It is objectively a fracture there. It's not based on you saying I got a pain in my leg. You can see it. It's there. Blood work is another way. So with fibromyalgia, there's not a lot of objective testing, although there are some things now that are popping up here and there. One, some of you may be familiar with the FMA test for fibromyalgia. That is a test. All it does is really confirm, or it will confirm a clinical diagnosis of fibromyalgia. So if your doctor already feels you have fibromyalgia from just the clinical symptoms, they can get a FMA test, and that test comes back positive. Doctors will rely on that to just be more certain that fibromyalgia is what you have here. It's not the FMA tests do not, it's FM/A, just in case people wonder what I'm saying here. Those tests don't really tell anything to do with treatment. They don't alter treatment. A lot of times the doctor already knew you had fibromyalgia from their clinical diagnosis, but it is something that is objective. That is a test that's out there. It's covered by many medical plans. So if you have a medical plan, it's possible it would cover this type of testing. So it's something to keep in mind. And with that, we're at the end, and I would love to take any questions.
So, David, there's a few questions in the chat for you.
All right, let's take a look here. So
the first question that was asked was from Sherry. Are these work insurance benefits taxable?
Very good question. So let's go back and look at these here. So the taxable ones, let's go back here. So the ones that are taxable are some disability insurance benefits will be taxable, not all of them. That will depend on whether you paid the premiums or the employer paid the premiums. If you paid the premiums, they'll be non-taxable. If your employer paid, they'll be taxable. CPP disability, unfortunately, is taxable. But often your income at that level is at a level where there won't be much tax taken out. Workers' compensation is not taxable as income. Provincial income support, I think it's taxable, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. I'll be honest. That's something I'd have to check. The disability tax credit is not taxable because it's a tax deduction. And the Canada Disability Benefit, my thought is that this one will not be taxable as income. That's my thought. And in fact, I'm almost certain it would not. And I'm almost certain provincial income supports are not taxable as well.
Next question is from Bob. We know you don't deal with Quebec because they have their own laws. But he's asking, what about the Quebec pension plan?
Yeah. So the Quebec pension plan mirrors the Canadian pension plan, the Canada pension plan. So they're very similar, almost identical requirements for disability, almost identical requirements for how much you've had to pay in. So again, you'd want to go to the Quebec pension plan documents and look at them, but you would expect that program to be almost identical to the Canada pension plan program in that it would pay out disability benefits. QPP disability benefits would be paid to age 65, after which point you would transfer over to the QPP retirement. So it would work almost the same.
And how long after the job do you have to qualify for WCB, workers' compensation?
How long after the job do you? Okay, so right. So this might be someone who's with workers' compensation. They want you to make these claims like within weeks of the so-called injury. Now, if sometimes it's not, you weren't aware that maybe maybe this person's thinking maybe my fibromyalgia was from work and I didn't realize it at the time. The longer each province will have its own rules about, so workers' compensation is regulated province by province, and they will all have limits on how far out you can bring a claim. So some will limit it to a year, some have it more open-ended, but that's something you would have to get looked at in your situation to see, is this something I could bring? If you're years and years out and it was never reported, and there was no injury reported at all, then you've got a real problem to do it. But if you had an injury at work that was recorded, and now you think maybe fibromyalgia developed secondarily to that injury, that is something that you could open your old claim. So if you had an old, they might have called it a soft tissue injury claim or something like that has been closed, you could reopen old claims to say that this is a new condition. But it will be difficult. You'd have to have pretty solid evidence that injury led to the fibromyalgia, and that's going to be a difficult thing to prove often. You'd really need to have a proximity of like the injury and the fibromyalgia happening within a real continuum of time, not a huge gap of time. But it is possible. So I guess my short answer, the too long didn't read version is, if you had an open claim, you got a much better chance to reopen it and try to claim this. If you're talking about a work injury that was many years ago and there was never a claim put in, then I think then it would be very difficult to open that up.
Next question was, on average, how long does the process take if approved right away versus going through the appeal process?
Right. Each of those programs is different. The insurance company ones can happen quite quickly within a matter. So with the short-term disability, usually with the insurance ones, there's a short-term component that goes for about 3 months, and then it switches over to a long-term. Those can be approved quite quickly. You get the forms in, you can be approved in like 30 days. CPP disability, we're doing applications for people, and those on average are anywhere from 4 months at the fastest up to like 8 months at the longest. So with most coming in around 4, 5, 6 months, when you'll they'll process it and you'll get your payments. Workers' compensation is fast. So if they do the investigation, you'll get proved in like 30 days type of thing. And the provincial income support, in theory, can be quick, but those are ones where that can often take a lot of time because there's often a lot of denials and a lot of paperwork, and they tend to drag out for months.
What about if you have to appeal?
What's
the time? The
for
average
appeals?
time frame?
Yes, so appeals vary. The appeals can vary a lot. Most appeals have to be done. So for the Canada Pension Disability, the appeals have to be done in 90 days. So you'll do the appeal, and then usually you could do it right away, but usually decisions will happen. If you do an appeal and get it all in, even if it's earlier than the 90 days you have to do it, say you get it done in the first 30 days, you could look at most of these appeal decisions will come in 30 days for almost all of these programs. They're very quick at doing appeal decisions. The initial decision to process it usually takes longer because I think it's in a queue for someone to take control of it. But once someone has control of it, the appeals happen a lot faster. If you get to, so the appeals, there's 2 levels of appeals. There's appeals at the agency or company. Those usually happen you'll get a decision within 30 days of getting all your appeal documents in. If you have to go to these, like I said, after you do the internal appeal, you go to these external courts or tribunals. Those can take longer. Those can take up to a year or more for you to get your day in court. But once you get your day in court, the decision usually comes out within 1 to 2 months.
And next one, somebody's already commented on it, but we'll ask it publicly as well. Can you apply for the new disability benefit even if you receive CPP?
Yes. Well, we don't know because they have not really released the program yet, but the intention would be that in theory, yes, that nothing is excluded. What will matter is whether your CPP disability plus any other income you have puts you over whatever threshold they create. There's some ideas that this threshold might be around $20,000 at the low end and might be higher if you're in a family with other income providers. But if you're a single person, there's an idea that the threshold might be around 20,000. So anyone on CPP is going to be under 20,000 because the most anyone can get on CPP is about 17, 18,000 a year. I forget what exactly it is this year, but it's that range. So you could potentially, depending on where the threshold is for the income to qualify for the Canada Disability Benefit. So they're going to be looking at your total income, and CPP would just be one of the sources.
Next question was in regards to Quebec again. If they had a similar program to ODSP.
Yes, all provinces have social support and income support programs. Now they vary widely in how good they are. With Ontario, believe it or not, being one of the best, people in Ontario wouldn't believe that, but with Ontario being one of the better ones. Now, cost of living is higher in Ontario too, and with Atlantic Canada and being some of the lowest, and the Western province is pretty good, with BC being pretty good too. But again, people there would dispute me on that because, again, cost of living, when that's taken into account, it kind of evens out.
And Tina says, I was a stay-at-home mom when I was diagnosed with fibro 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I am unable to go back to my job due to my symptoms. How do I go about applying?
Okay, this is a good example. So if you were a stay-at-home mom when you were diagnosed, if you had worked before that, so that would be the first question. Did you ever work before that? If you had worked before that, programs like the Canada Pension Disability, and I would assume probably the Quebec Pension Disability as well, they will allow you to they'll give you credit for years out of the workforce as a stay-at-home mom or dad or parent. So that is something if you did work at some point before you went off to be a stay-at-home parent, you might qualify for CPP disability. The only other ones you could really apply for would be the provincial income security, the provincial income support, if your total family income goes below their levels that they look at, potentially the Canada Disability Benefit when it comes out. And that's probably it, I'm thinking. Yeah, because workers' comp, probably no. You wouldn't have group insurance because you weren't working. So it's probably going to be CPP disability would be a possibility if you worked and paid into it, and that you originally left work to be a stay-at-home parent. So how do you go about applying? You could go to the Canada Pension. We give away free books and information on how to actually apply. We've got, I'm pointing at one of them here, and we're going to make those available for free to your organization. So you could pick up the book. I got a book here I made called, we give this out for free, but it's a workbook that takes you through how to fill out the application. So those are resources you can get. But basically, you would need to fill out the application forms, which you can get online, or you can get them at any Service Canada office and get those forms in to Service Canada for processing.
Right. Next question, is the FMA test available in public health, provincial health testing?
I don't think so, because it's not a necessary test so it doesn't get you anywhere, because most times when you're going to get that test, the doctors are already like 90% sure you have fibromyalgia through a clinical diagnosis of your widespread pain, your symptoms, ruling everything else out. But I don't think the FMA would be covered by like your provincial Medicare, but it is something you could ask about. I'm not 100% sure about that. It might be. You could ask your doctor about it. It's an expensive test, so you don't want to have to pay for it yourself. It's like close to $2,000 or something like that. And it doesn't really, you don't need it to win a disability claim. It just is it's one of the few examples of where you can get something objective it takes away the insurance or other people's ability to try to blame this on something else and say that you are not, this is really depression or a metabolic disorder and you should be doing this other thing. Getting that test can really help take the wind out of that for them, if that's what's going on.
And Sylvie would like to know, are you allowed to apply for more than one program, for example, CPP and ODSP?
It's a very good question. In fact, these programs require you to apply for multiple. So if you get approved for ODSP, they will require you to apply for CPP disability, because if you're approved for CPP disability, ODSP will reduce what they pay you by the amount you're getting from CPP disability. So this is kind of I want to make sure I don't say the bad words here, but this is kind of the trap that happens where you're relying on disability benefits, but you realize like it's kind of a shell game of sorts. Like if you get approved for one and then you get approved from another, together that would give you enough income to have a basic life. The problem is these insurance companies and government programs, they're able to like reduce what they're paying by what the other one's paying, and all of a sudden you're getting no more money or barely any more money overall. So this is one of the problems. So these programs though will require you to apply for the others because they get benefits back and forth. CPP is the only one that doesn't subtract any. So if you get CPP, you get it. But if you're getting ODSP or any of these provincial benefits, they all will subtract. So they'll take away they'll reduce what they're paying you by what you're getting from CPP. So sometimes that means they don't have to pay you anything at all if your CPP is more than what they're paying. Or if your CPP is say $1,000 and you were getting $1,200 from ODSP, well, all of a sudden you start getting your $1,000 from CPP. ODSP now just starts paying you $200 because they subtract the $1,000. So you're no better off in some ways. You're still only getting $1,200 a month. But I would say to people like getting CPP disability is important, because it does, the younger you are, the more important it is that it will increase you. It's almost the opposite of what you think. Getting approved for CPP disability will increase your CPP retirement. And without getting into a conversation of why that is, the basic idea of it is that your CPP retirement looks at your entire working life, and they say, okay, this person between 18 and 65, how many years were they working in the workforce? And they will say, okay, there was 20 years in the workforce, and there's like 40 years overall. So they'll divide 20 by 40, and they'll come up with this thing. What happens if you're on CPP disability is they don't count any of the years as workforce years when you're on CPP disability. So all of a sudden, the division if you've got 20 years in, maybe the division now is much less because they don't have this big amount of years that you were not paying into the program. It looks like, oh, they paid into almost all the years that they were eligible in the workforce. That's great. That will result in a higher pension. So it's very important to get the CPP disability approved, because all the years on CPP disability, if those years will not be credited as or penal, you won't be penalized as having years out of the workforce. Whereas if you are not getting CPP disability, even though you're unable to work for purposes of your CPP retirement, they will count those as years you could have been working, and you'll be penalized for not working and contributing in those years.
And next question is CPP dependent on family income?
It is not. You can be a millionaire and get CPP disability. I always tell people that. It is not dependent. All it cares about is your ability to work. So it only cares about income from employment where you're actually doing work. So if you're independently wealthy, if you have income from renting out one of your rooms, it won't matter. It has to be like income from you doing work in the workforce. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. They view it as like disability benefits. You've paid into it, so you get it.
What's the minimum amount of work hours required to qualify for CPP?
Okay, so the way that works is don't think of it as a time when your fibromyalgia started. Think of the day when fibromyalgia got to the point where you could no longer work in the workforce. So let's just say that's today. To qualify for CPP disability, I would have had to have paid into CPP disability 4 of 6 years leading up to today. So that they will look back. If you've been a long-time person in the workforce, it can be 3 of 6 years. If you've been 25 years or more of contributions. But that is the basic requirement. At the time you became unable to work because of disability, you had to have paid in 4 of the 6 years leading up to that year. And so they'll just count it. You can go on Service Canada. Everyone can get their My Service Canada account, and you can go through the process of logging into it. And when you get in there, you can click on CPP contributions. And if you see the CPP contribution sheet, it's easy to figure out if you have met the 4 of 5 years. You just kind of go through and count with you've got 4 out of you look at 4 of 6 years. You just look at any 6-year period. Do you have 4 of those years where you put in contributions? And that has to fall on the year when you became disabled.
I got one more question that was submitted prior to, but before that, Maggie had her hand up.
Sure.
Maggie has asked.
She put it in the chat. Do you have any experience with Veterans Affairs and Fibro?
Yes. I don't have a lot of experience with Veterans Affairs, no, but it would work the exact same way as workers' compensation. So with Veterans Affairs, workers' compensation, you have to prove it was a work-related injury. With Veterans Affairs, it has to be a service-related. So you would need to link the fibromyalgia to the service-related injury or medical condition. Often very easy to do, but that would be the requirements there. And it would be the same kind of system as workers' comp. You could always reopen a claim if you think that they missed the fibromyalgia component, but you need a doctor to really make that link. Again, you don't have to prove it's conclusive. You just have to prove it's more likely, like 51%, that it's more likely than not that had you not had this service-related injury, you would not have this fibromyalgia right now. As long as you can prove that, then you can get it covered.
And just for additional information, I'm going through that at the moment.
Okay.
And I've talked to someone, and she's the one who mentioned fibromyalgia. So veterans is starting to recognize.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So next question that I've got here is, are there a lot of hoops to get through to submit a disability claim? As in, how many forms by how many specialists need
Yeah.
to be filled out?
Yeah, there are a lot of hoops, and especially with a condition like fibromyalgia. I hate to say it, but this will be a condition where you often run into the most problems in terms of getting approved. Doesn't mean you can't get approved, but you have to go through the most hoops of anyone. A similar would be someone with like chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, post-COVID syndrome, is all these kind of invisible injury syndromes where it's a chronic condition. You have to go through all the hoops of showing you've ruled out other conditions, you've tried to stay in the workforce. But in terms of the paperwork's pretty basic. So to do the initial application, it's quite basic. It's like 1 or 2 forms. Now the CPP one can be a little bit daunting. That's why I have the workbook here, just to plug that again. That workbook gives you examples of just to get in the mindset of how to answer some of these questions. But a lot of these cases will get denied based on the initial application. And this person mentioned like other reports, often you do have to get more medical records beyond just the report from your doctor. You may have to get your complete family medical records, records and reports from some of your specialists, employment records, pharmacy records are often very helpful, and to show a full picture to get an approval. But it varies from person to person, how far down that road you have to go.
And whoops. Okay. So Rianne, hopefully I pronounced that right. I was a stay-at-home mom for many years, then returned to work despite struggling with my fibromyalgia. When I was no longer able to continue to work due to an increase in symptoms, I was refused CPP benefits because I was no longer considered as having a long and prolonged condition. This was in 2008, and I reapplied now.
Okay, so that was in 2008. So long and prolonged. So CPP disability, one of the reasons they will deny people is they'll say, well, we believe you have a serious disability and you can't work, but their second part of their requirement is that it has to be prolonged, meaning that it has to be not something that's going to get better anytime soon. Now, often they will deny claims on that by saying bogus things like, oh, there's still treatment, you haven't tried it, you're still trying this new medication. A lot of these are bogus because no one really believes that these medications are going to cure you. Like they're going to make your quality of life better, but not necessarily. The intent is usually not that they're going to put you back in the workforce always. So if someone who did a CPP application in 2008 that got denied, as long as it was not denied by the tribunal back then. So if this was just a denial from CPP disability itself, and you didn't go to a tribunal, you would have to go before, back then you would have went before a judge or a panel of judges. If you didn't go to the panel of judges, it's conceivable that you could redo a CPP application. But the challenge with a case like this, and I've worked on some of these ones, they're very tricky. You could do a new application, but you'd have to prove your disability back in 2008. So because that would have been the only time where you had 4 of 6 years of contribution. So you'd have to prove your disability was back in 2008, say that they had it wrong, here's the new evidence back in 2008, and then also prove that it's continued to today. And the problem with those types of cases is usually trying to get the medical records you'd have to be able to get the medical records from 2008 and earlier to be able to try to attempt that type of case. It's very difficult to do, but it's not impossible.
Trudy, I don't know if you have any more questions or.
I will ask, if you're denied disability and the tribunal, what are the options? Are there other options?
So if you go to the tribunal like for CPP disability or any of them?
Any of them?
Okay. So if you go to a tribunal, They all have different rules. So let's just start with CPP disability. The way it works there now is you actually get 2 kicks at the can. So if you go there to the tribunal, you get your day, usually on Zoom, believe it or not, you're doing your Zoom hearing. If you get denied, you get another hearing. You can appeal and get another hearing. If that next hearing gets denied, then you have the option to do an appeal to the federal court, but those appeals are very unlikely to have a success. Because you can only appeal on these technical legal issues, right? You don't get to kind of tell your story again. So really you get 2 shots at CPP disability at the tribunal, and then potentially one to the Court of Appeal, but not really. With workers' comp, if you're denied by workers' comp, your hearing is actually with all workers' comps in every province have a tribunal. You go to that tribunal makes a decision. If you disagree with their decision, again, you have to go to the court system in your province, and those appeals are very hard to win because, again, you have to show that there was an error of law or these types of very technical things that are very hard to prove. The other programs are the same thing. So like ODSP, there's an actual tribunal. I've actually did a case before that in Ontario. So it's the same thing. You'd go to that tribunal, and then above that, it's reviewed by the courts. Yeah. And with insurance, a lot of that will just go straight to the courts. So you go with insurance cases. If the insurance company denies, you file a lawsuit. That's how you do the appeal. That lawsuit goes to a judge. If you don't agree with that judge, you can go to the Court of Appeal again. And again, it's very difficult to get those overturned once you get the decision from the tribunal or judge.
Well, thank you, David. If there are no more questions, I just want to say,
I do have one more.
Fire away. I got all the time in the world here.
CPP disability, from what I've gathered, normally if they approve, they'll approve it for a shorter period of time. In my case, they approved it for 5 years. So I have to reapply again, and that last year. Is there a reason why I know some people approve, but is the process when you've got everything else approved, like disability tax credit, and it's just kind of mind-boggling why they would do like short periods of time.
That is not a typical thing. So there would have been, that will happen sometimes. It doesn't happen with everybody that CPP will give you a short-term approval. That is, I would say it's becoming more common, but it's still not the most common situation. Most people will just get approved and that's it. People that get in what you're describing, usually there was evidence of something coming up, like there was a treatment program, a pain clinic. There was something coming up that they want to revisit. The younger you are, the more likely they will. The clients I've had where you're describing, where they approve for 5 years and revisit, there's the younger people who had something coming up that they just wanted to revisit the whole thing. Often you don't have to go through the whole application. It's just they review it, you send in some forms, and often it's just that's it. You keep going, but that is why there must have been something about your situation where there was, or it could have just, maybe there wasn't. They have a lot of discretion, the people that do the approvals, but that's usually what would happen.
Anyone have any more questions?
So, Kate, like a lot of people here may qualify for this. I would encourage you to keep an eye out for this Canada Disability Benefit. I'm going to be keeping my eye on that. I was kind of a Twitter warrior there while the government was going over it, and I've kind of backed off now just because Twitter is not always the most productive place to be. But I'm going to be keeping an eye to see what happens with the next round and where this thing goes, and try to keep the government's feet to the fire here, because this has been a long time coming.
Thank you, David. Fibromyalgia Association Canada have also been advocating on behalf of people with fibromyalgia on Bill C-22, and we too are trying to stay on top of that. So
yeah,
this has been a great presentation, David. So I really thank you, and it's a great way for us to kick off our Fibromyalgia Awareness Week.
I think this is fantastic. I think education is the best way. Like part of our mission at Resolute Legal is to empower people to win their own cases. And we're there for the tough ones where you do need help. But most people with the right education and resources can do this on their own.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, it was great to be here.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Thank you.